Today we are looking at still life photography, starting off with the work of Edward Steichen and Irving Penn. Now both Steichen and Penn were commercial photographers, basically doing their work for magazines, for advertising. This particular piece by Steichen I think is interesting because I think it's a promo piece. In other words, a promotional piece. And what I mean by this is this was not for a particular client, but something he did to show to clients, to show how talented he was and how he could make interesting photographs with their products. I say this because these matchboxes here, notice how he's carefully placed tissue over the top of the boxes so you don't see a brand name on these. Why do that unless you want them to be kind of generic to show them to a lot of different people? Still life, since things are not moving, you can spend a lot of time setting up your shot. I'm sure he had his camera on a tripod and spent lots of time making this photo look casual. And by that, what I mean is it looks as if, these boxes, they just dumped out the matches and threw the boxes down. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you look carefully, you'll notice that the matches are arranged around each of the boxes and kind of an arch. Kind of a semicircle around each of the boxes. Also, almost all the match heads are pointing away from the box. There's a few pointing the other way, but generally they're almost all pointing away. And yes, they're not perfectly lined up, but that's done on purpose. Perfect arches would be boring. So he makes this arrangement, which looks pretty casual, but probably took hours to get into just the position he liked. Then he probably spent a few more hours getting it lit, because lighting is something else you can spend a lot of time on to get the effects just the way you like it. This photograph here has at least two lights on it. A big overhead light to fill in the shadows here created by the spotlight. On the side of the table here, he's got a spotlight very low, so the light comes straight across the table and creates these long shadows off of the matchsticks. Kind of like late in the day near sunset when if you're out walking and you see your shadow just go way off into the distance there. Same thing here. The shadows become part of the graphic element of the photograph. Becomes part of the composition. If you're photographing things that are metal or something with glass in it, then you've got to deal with reflections. Now in this picture, Steichen is using the reflections as part of the composition, taking advantage of that fact rather than trying to eliminate it. Here are some old-time cigarette lighters. I think it's interesting when you look at these because today cigarette lighters are junk. They're a little tank of plastic with a cheap metal head on it. Back in the day, cigarette lighters were men's jewelry. They cost some money. They're made out of very good metal, finely machined, and they often had engravings on them, as you can see on this set here. Now he puts these cigarette lighters on top of a metal plate, which he's created some scribes and lines on to further accentuate the reflections. Makes for an interesting presentation of these metallic objects. Now, the next photographer I want to talk about is Irving Penn, another commercial photographer. Penn was known primarily for his fashion photography, but he also did a lot of still lifes and advertising type work too. In this picture, this is called ingredients for stuffing. The idea is, this is probably around Thanksgiving, with the things that might go into stuffing for a turkey you would be making. See the bread, onion, an egg, various mushroom, clams, a little bit of wine there, all these various objects. Again, it looks like these are just kind of dumped on the table, but a lot of time spent to make it look casual and offhand. Notice how the elements here, the round elements, are placed around this clam here. How the piece of bread comes in at an angle this way, which is offset by the angle of the celery going the other way. And this linear shape is on top of the cylindrical or circular shape of the onion there. Even things like the seeds out of these cracked nuts in the foreground here are probably very carefully placed to look nice and yet casual at the same time. Here is a jar of skin cream. Here is your assignment. Go photograph a jar of skin cream and make it exciting. Well, how do you do that? I mean, it's a one-tone bottle with some text on it and pretty boring. So what does Penn do? It's moisturizer, right? He puts it into a pan of water, and it's a big pan, so you don't see the edges. Almost looks like it's a solid table until you see the splash in the bottom right part of the picture there. And I guess this is pushing the possibilities of still life, because actually this is kind of an action picture. He has his assistant squeezing an eyedropper to create drops to fall into the water, and then captures this action of the drop splashing up. Another action still life contradiction in terms. But here the ad is for tonic water. Water, basically. How in the world do you make water interesting? Clear, boring water. Well, pour it into a glass. Capture the action of the water pouring into the glass. Make it a little more dynamic. And then behind it, you have this plain white backdrop, but then he puts a lime, a peach, a lemon, and he puts them behind the glass so that the curve of the glass is like a lens, distorting those shapes a bit. Makes it much more interesting. This photo is called After Dinner Games. This was something that popped up in the New Yorker magazine. And the idea here is this is what might entertain a sophisticated New York couple after they have their dinner, maybe some friends over. You've got the after dinner coffee cup in the middle. The games you might play, there's some cards, dominoes, chess piece, poker chips. No cigarette, but you can see the burned out match in the bottom implying the cigarette. Now look at the arrangement here. Look at the playing cards, for instance. 2 of the 3 cards are the backs are facing us. The one where the card is facing us is a very simple card, the Ace of Hearts. So to help simplify the arrangement here, makes for a nice overall photograph. Another assignment, photograph frozen vegetables and make them sexy. Well, how do you do that? If you've ever seen frozen vegetables in the freezer at the grocery, they're the most unappetizing things. They're in square plastic boxes with frost on them. Not exactly delectable looking. But what he does, he tears off the boxes and then piles them on top of each other, plays with the arrangement a bit, and he creates this, which looks more like a piece of modern sculpture. This photo is called Opera Accident. The idea here is the opera goer is leaving the show and has dropped her purse, and all these items spill out of the purse. So items that you might find in a person going to the opera glasses, small kind of binoculars, a watch, a whistle, looks like a cold pill there, a pen, reading glasses, looks like a lighter, wallet. I like the way the cigarette is crushed between the binoculars and the watch. Again, this looks haphazard, but they spent a lot of time probably breaking half a dozen cigarettes to get just the right break and the right amount of tobacco, spilling out from it there. Still life can be very simple and still very arresting. There was an old saying, put a bug in their ear. The idea that you can't ignore something like that. If you put a thought into the person said they can't ignore, they would said that you were putting a bug in their ear. Well, here Penn has literally put a bug in somebody's ear, which, 2 elements, the side of the person's head in an extreme close-up, and this bug, which I really hope is plastic, and at least dead, because it wouldn't do to have this thing moving around. But, a very simple thing, but well executed, and into a picture that has a nice simplicity to it and is very arresting.